The criteria A, perhaps you might refer to as the primary criteria, is the ability to observe, because it'd be more likely an observation on your part or other person's part, rather than the perception, rather than the client being able to report this themselves, or you're observing it through the report rather, but depersonalization and or derealization. And I think the nice thing about this case study that I was just referring to is we see this, and I think you can make the case for, even though the case study is at least by its design associated with dissociative fugue, or dissociative amnesia rather. I think you could make the case, or at least you could see that there's depersonalization and derealization occurring with this client, that they appear to be experiencing it. So in the depersonalization aspect, the experience is unreality attachment, being an outside observer to one's thoughts and feelings. Well, we hear our fictional client Julia describe that. She describes it. Why is that woman so upset? Why is she crying? Right? But she also talks about sort of tactile physiology. She says, someone touches her shoulder. No, wait, someone touched my shoulder. Right? And she's like, she's not sure. So, and then there's the derealization, experiences of unreality or detachment. One of the ways, and this is the way I've, the way it's reflected in the fictional case study is the way I've seen it, which is I can't tell, meaning the client, if this is really happening or I'm dreaming this. And we hear the client mention that a couple of times, I think, in the case study. So that's probably the most common way that I hear clients who are experiencing this report it. And you see things are experienced in a sort of dreamlike, foggy, visual, and it could include visual distortion, sort of like, I'm not sure what I'm seeing, right? So you can have one or the other. Now they describe presence of persistent and recurrent experiences. In our case study, we see, sort of a new onset, but that onset is paired with, very specific and severe traumatic event in that person's life. So I would just make the nuance. I don't think it's a disagreement, but I would think the nuance that that you can assign depersonalization, derealization disorder. It doesn't have if you look at these criteria, it doesn't say they have to be occurring for an end period of time. There's not a threshold time. So particularly in the context of you're aware, and sometimes this happens, like in the case study, where you as the worker are more aware of the traumatic event than the client who experienced it is at the time, right? And that's part of what's happening, that Julia's brain she's shut down because it's overloaded. She's overloaded. It's too much. And that's why I talk about the brain injury. Her brain is injured from that experience, and the brain's trying to protect itself, in my opinion. So now certainly someone like Julia could go without immediate access. But one of the things that happens narratively is that she goes to a school she used to work at within the same school system, and she's fortunate that there are people there who we infer know her from her previous employment there at that school, and make sure that she gets professional assistance support right away. But certainly doesn't always work out that way, and someone may be experiencing these for quite some time before they're able to get themselves help, or someone helps them get help, or maybe our willingness to avail themselves of it. We see, our client wouldn't necessarily have initiated this help on her own, for the reason I would interpret as, that the brain is shutting down because her brain is protecting itself, if you will, as an organ from what is just untenable stimuli, an experience that it just can't emotionally manage. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of depersonalization, derealization. Criteria B. So criteria B reads, reality testing remains intact during these depersonalization and or derealization experiences. So what does reality testing mean in this context? So in this context, and this is not, by the way, stated specifically in the DSM. I had to interpret this a little bit. You have to take that as you will. But the context, as I understand it, references psychodynamic theory, where reality testing in this context is that a person is aware of reality versus non-reality. And so I'm not so sure about that. In other words, you could probably watch the case of Julia, make a case like she's struggling to in fact, frankly, there's a level of awareness of the reality that she's desperately trying to avoid. So I suppose you could make the case that she has this awareness of what's real and what's not to some extent. And, if she's perhaps that she's just running from it. But I would say, just own experience, that I'm not sure the person consistently understands or is intellectually aware that that they're experiencing depersonalization or derealization, and it's a disconnection, an unreality, to use their words. Often, I think the way it's acted out here by the actor who portrays the client is pretty close to what I've seen. It's just a struggle. Maybe there's some level of awareness that there's, okay, this isn't quite right. And that's distressing, right? And we see again, not an acting critic, but the actor seems to portray that pretty well. Okay, so which is, I guess, the reason why I just say that is, if you have a client and you are seeing both or one or the other, depersonalization, derealization, and it really seems like depersonal derealization disorder, but they're struggling, if not unable to, as best you can tell, to maintain that awareness, that reality testing awareness in this context, that you wouldn't necessarily, okay, well, I guess it can't be that, I guess. So is what I'm trying to say about that. Yeah, I mean, like the other dissociative disorders, it's pretty hard for a client to, in almost any circumstance that I've been familiar with, for them to sort of hold it together. Fake it till you make it, as I hear some people say. It's almost impossible to do. It's the stress and level of impairment is pretty significant, at least in my experience.